Hey there. I stopped you going a little fast. You realize this is 35?
Oh, it's 35?
It is, yeah. So you're
going about 41?
Yeah, 43 is what the radar said.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Do you have your license, the registration, insurance? Were you wearing your seatbelt when I stopped you?
No.
No? That's no good.
Just being honest with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
When we see Koberger at the traffic stop late at night on August 21st, 2022, does he appear creepy, weird, or psychopathic? At one point he seems to even sympathize with the cop who stopped him, saying there's no point in being dishonest about his own actions.
Then the conversation turned to the reason Koberger was arrested. Quote, Detective Gilbertson asked Koberger why he thought we were there. He said he wanted Detective Gilbertson to tell him.
3 years later, are we able to say why we are here? Why Koberger did what he did? Are we? Are you?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Now, during the same stop, Koberger later seems to question the cop's protocols, perhaps hoping to get some leniency, but correctly pointing out that the cop failed to make sure whether he was using the seatbelt. Koberger also seems to balk at the officer wanting his phone number.
You wearing your seatbelt when I stopped you? No. That's no good. With a seatbelt like this, I didn't check as I was coming up, so that's why I asked you.
Do you usually?
I should. I noticed you weren't wearing it, and I'm on this emphasis, and like I said, I'm getting paid by ICD, and they want us to enforce the seatbelt law, so.
You'll also notice there's a slight flicker in Brian's eyes as he glances very quickly, almost furtively, down to the body cam, the camera on the officer's chest. What do you think? Do you think Koberger knew then what he was going to do? Do you think he'd already made a plan and knew exactly what he was going to do? If Koberger knew then what he was going to do later that year, then giving his phone number to law enforcement wasn't a good start. And who knows, perhaps he was close to a self-imposed deadline and the police stop caused him to delay it. In my opinion, though, Koberger's criminal psychology hadn't quite crystallized yet, but the stars were aligning. He felt lonely and isolated. You can see he's alone in the car. It's late at night. And he'd basically emerged from that entire summer with nothing to show for it. No girlfriend, no friends, very little in the way of fun. By the way, did anyone check what day of the week the 21st of August was, the day of the stop? Well, it was a Sunday night. Typically the time where one is starting to get a little bit antsy about being alone, especially if one's been alone the whole weekend and work is looming the next day. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you're finding my work interesting, worthwhile, and you haven't subscribed, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Bear in mind, I don't really do live streams, so if you want to support this channel, please do consider hitting the like button. If you've never hit it before, now's your chance. All right, and let's get started. In my opinion, at this point, Koberger was simply restless and unfulfilled. I think it's important to stress that in the beginning, when he was driving to Idaho, those very first sorties to King Road, and perhaps when he found his way to the funhouse right in the beginning and watched and listened to the revelry quietly from his car, he might not have wanted much more than to simply look around or even to get an invitation to the party. By the way, I've driven there myself, and there was loud music on the weekend that I was there going on throughout the day. Not the case where he lived, where Brian lived. In other words, the first, second, and third trips there weren't stalking, in my opinion. It was probably something like someone who's bored and driving around, and someone who's really just curious. It's just curiosity killing the cat. But I think over time, going over there became increasingly an obsession. It was also a compulsion eventually, because the funhouse was simultaneously the one place he was becoming familiar with, and if he made any overtures online, it was also the source, becoming increasingly the source of his pain. This was the place he wanted in. This was the lively place where people were interacting, laughing, partying, enjoying time together. But this was also clearly the place he wasn't going to be allowed in. Others, yes. Him, no. And when you drive around Moscow, as I did, that house does stand out. It is easy to see from a distance. And so it would be almost like a light attracting a moth to that sort of warm glow. If the rest of his life hadn't started unraveling, for example, if he got that job with the cops, if he got a girlfriend, if his neighbors continued to invite him to dinner, they started and then they stopped, if things were going well with his work, if he got along with his classmates, all of those things, well, I don't think things would have escalated into criminal psychology. In other words, if a social life beckoned, if someone invited him to some kind of get-together, it would have diverted him from the dark side, I believe. Instead, social death beckoned, and not only the possibility of it, the absolute certainty of it. And it was one that he thought he couldn't escape. He couldn't escape the certainty of social death. It was like his fate. It was his fate to be locked out, left out. And when he realized that, I think that is when the criminal psychology started to crystallize. Well, if you're going to do this to me, well, I'm going to make you feel what it feels like. So I don't think he became a psychopathic murderer in a week or a month or even a few months. I think the gears are turning over a much longer period. But yes, towards the end, things escalate quite severely and quite quickly. His social death occurs when everyone else is experiencing giddy peaks in their social lives, falling in love, having fun on campus, and that contrast is jarring. That contrast exposes him. That contrast is agonizing and hard to avoid. Now I want to deal with something that we dealt with previously on this channel, but it seems like amnesia has set in the meantime. And that is a return to bad Teachergate. Have you ever heard those words? Many people are talking right now about this case, but who isn't? Who isn't talking about it? What is the one exception to the crowd that are talking about this case? I mean, the locals. Well, those who knew him best, the professors, his classmates, other students who saw him and interacted with him for hours at a time every single day. Do they have nothing to say about him?
Where are they?
Well, that is a real narrative hole in the story. Did you know that it was there? Few seem to know to look for it in the first place. If you examine the media narrative right now, countless outlets report on bad Teachergate. That's the term I came up with to describe the intervention professors discussed over text as a result of Koberger's poor relationships with particularly female students. It involved other aspects as well, such as strict marking and homophobic remarks. One thing you struggle to find in any of this reporting is the critical detail, when the intervention happened. You basically have a huge crisis where the student body are taking action because they don't like Koberger, they think he's rude, which makes when this happened in relation to the crime crucial. Yet the thinking is so scattered, so disconnected, no one seems to be connecting that to the crime itself. I found one British publication, The Independent, giving the date as September 2022, less than 2 months prior to the murder. But did you know that Koberger actually met with professors to discuss an improvement plan on November 2nd, just 11 days before the murders? Do you think that may have triggered him or fueled a sense of resentment for other students, for the whole university community, essentially? The reporting is so bad you've got to go back 2 years to February 2023 to find the exact date when this intervention occurred, which was, as I say, November 2nd, although altercations occurred on several days in September and October. September 23rd, for example, Obviously and understandably, this aspect of the conversation is a lightning rod for attention to head where the university doesn't want it to go, which is to the university, to the students, to the professors. But that is where the big hole is in the narrative. Whenever there is a mass shooting, you seldom hear someone breaking rank and breaking silence to say, "Oh yeah, we hated him, we picked on him, we humiliated him. He really wasn't very happy. It was quite obvious." Talking about Koberger's interest in Elliot Rodger occurred at De Saulles, a different university, years earlier. What I see going on there is projection and transference. Because you think Elliot Rodger is similar to Koberger, you think he thinks so, or he was inspired. I don't. The former undergrad classmate Josh Ferraro said in One Night in Idaho, The College Murders, Elliot Rodger was a young man in college that was jaded and hated his life because he lacked the attention from friends, family, and most of all women. Well, I don't think that was his lot in De Saulles. It was his lot at Washington State University. So years later, are we able to say why we are here? We know who committed these crimes, but can we say why? If Koberger doesn't tell us, can we say why?
But according to forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatorre, we can't yet label Koberger as a psychopath or even a serial killer.
Even if he was a serial, even if he does have that, what actually happened was that he was a mass killer.
Personally, I find it astonishing that where we are right now, people are still trying to simply define the crime. That should have occurred when the crime happened. Of course, it's correct to say that you need to be able to define the crime, and yes, this is a mass killing, although mass killings are very seldom with a knife. I think a more interesting question is whether Koberger intended for it to be a mass killing all along, or did he intend to have only one victim, but then was surprised to find Kaylee with Maddie, and then that led in turn to other killings as well.
To this date, we have never found a single connection, anything, between any of the 4 victims or the other 2 surviving roommates with him. No pictures, no texts, no.
Now, we've just seen Koberger giving his phone number to a cop in August. Is he really going to want to make himself traceable in terms of his phone? In the Chris Watts case, there was also a huge amount of data missing from Chris Watts's phone. Well, guess where it went? Into the secret calculator app. And they weren't able to actually retrieve that data. So since it was missing, does that mean there's no connection, or simply that the authorities weren't able to find that data? Well, not being able to find data and not being able to establish a connection doesn't mean there wasn't a connection. If you say Koberger intended a mass killing all along, why was Ethan, who was the most serious threat to him, not killed first? Why take the risk of going upstairs, leaving this big kid, this big guy downstairs, and why take the risk in killing several people and allowing the greatest threat time to counter him, even prepare for him, possibly even prevent him from leaving? Well, those are some of my preliminary thoughts on Koberger's psychology. I am going to take it further than that, not in this video, but look out for part 2 in Koberger's Psychology, Unraveling the Enigma. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.